I'm talking about 5 of my all-time favorite bicycle frame builders and why I love their work so much. Bishop Bikes. Chris Bishop makes some of the most beautiful and refined bicycles. So he's building usually in a lugged and a fillet brazed, more of a traditional construction method design, making more classic road and track randonneering bikes. I really appreciate his sensibility of the aesthetic of it. You know, the aesthetic decisions that he makes about how he's going to shape the fillet, how he's going to carve the lugs, how he's going to subtly bend the tubes, if at all. You know, the way that oh my God, some of the fork crowns on some of the road forks that he's made, he has just put so many hours into reshaping and reforming and adding a little plate somewhere. Just amazing work on the bicycles that he makes, and it's so tasteful. I just really think like the decisions that he makes about what things are going to look like, I couldn't agree more that they look so good. I'm such a big fan of it. And then when he finishes the metal work on a bike, he'll hand it over to one of a handful of really good painters, and the paint work is always second to none on his bikes. It's just the designs and the paint schemes, everything about it just looks so good. I met Chris and his wife at the Philly Bike Expo when I was pretty new to cycling, and I hadn't really made any frames with my name on them, or not that he would have heard of, and he treated me like such a equal, such a peer, and it made me feel so good. And I can't say enough nice things about Chris, and his work is just top-notch. Engin Cycles. So Drew Guldalian is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and he has a retail bike shop, and then he makes in the back building, he has this badass shop, and it's like a frame builder's dream to just walk around there and see all these old manual machines that he has collected for dedicated mitering operations and stuff. And then in the last 5 years or so, he's been collecting all these CNC machines so that he can basically, I think, the way I would describe it to someone who didn't know Drew's work is I would say Drew isn't so easily satisfied with what he can get off of the shelf. And so when he's he's invested so much of his life into the bicycle and making and selling amazing bicycles. And so Drew has some idea about how the chainstay yokes for a short chainstay 29er mountain bike, off the shelf, they're just really not quite what he would want. And so he designs, or has designed for him, the chainstay yoke that then he welds into the frame of the bike so that he can get exactly the tire clearances and the geometry that he wants. You know, I think the rest of us in the frame building world will make more concessions like, well, you know, I'd like to do it this way, but I live in the real world, so, you know, that's not going to happen. And then we operate within the confines of sort of the real world, and Drew is like, screw that, and he goes so far out of his way to make the custom tooling and fixtures, and now CNC machining the custom parts just to his spec, to get it just right, so that when he ships a bike out the door to his customer, it has the fewest number of compromises that he can manage. You know, he did a project where he CNC machined chainring spiders because the rest of the bicycle industry doesn't really care that the chain line for a road bike with road cranks and then a mountain bike spaced 142 rear hub, the chain line is kind of mismatched, and the rest of the bike industry doesn't seem interested in solving that problem. So Drew's gone out of his way to have designed a chainring spider that you can put on your cranks and then use specific chain rings to get just the right spread of gearing. And it's amazing, like the lengths that he's gone for some of these details, because he really cares about making the bicycle just right. Like, that's his vision, is to make the best bicycle he can, and he uses all the tools available to him to realize that vision. Even if for the rest of us frame builders, we might be ready to accept things the way they are a little bit sooner, Drew is like so driven. And then also, I think I love that he shares so much of the shop stuff in the process. And so for years I followed him on Flickr and then Instagram, and I sent him emails from time to time, or talked to him on the phone and asked him questions about how he gets a certain part of the process to work, or why he does something a certain way. And that sort of sharing community spirit about frame building, I really appreciate that. Strong Frames. Carl Strong is in Bozeman, Montana. He's been making bikes since I was probably 5 years old, maybe younger, right? And he's been running a business, and he talks about business more than the other frame builders in the industry tend to. I don't know anyone who talks about the business of frame building as much as Carl does, and so he can really be a valuable asset, a valuable resource to other frame builders, because there's podcasts and there are interviews with Bike Rumor and other places where he talks about sort of his perspective about you know, where like what sort of business model frame building is, and you know, where you can fit into that as a frame builder. I think a lot of us frame builders come at it because, you know, not because we're just opening up some corner store to, you know, put out our shingle and serve the community and make some money. We're like coming into it because it's a passion of ours and we want to take the craft seriously. We want to make something beautiful. But if we can't also support ourselves and run sustainable businesses, if we're trying to do this full time, then you know, then you're always working a part-time job, or you're always a paycheck away, or, you know, like a payment from a customer away from like not being able to pay your own bills and stuff. And so I just really appreciate sort of that a little bit of guidance that I've seen from things that Carl Strong has posted, and I called him up at least one time on the phone to talk about sort of some business stuff, and I was trying to get a better sense of how to market the frames that I was making, and I was a long way from being successful still, but he was really happy to make some time to talk to me about that. He recommended a book that was really useful to me. I read I think almost the whole book, and you know, I don't usually read a whole lot of like self-help and books like that. And not only does Carl talk about the business of things, and has that been super helpful to me, but also I really like his bikes. They're really straightforward, they're sensible, they're simple. I like the way that he's laid out his shop. He's got this nice house in Bozeman, Montana, and then he's got this big garage in his backyard. He used to have more of a commercial space that he owned, and he downsized into the shop in his backyard for a number of reasons, and I think he's written about that on his website. He talks about all the different shops that he's ever lived in. His website is a gold mine. Go check out his website. Spend a bunch of time there reading everything that he's written. And it's just, it's romantic to me to think about having a little backyard shop like that, like a 2.5 car or whatever it is garage, a small space that's like clean and thoughtfully organized. He's got a lot of cool machines packed in there, and yeah, he just makes really like beautiful, refined, straightforward bikes. I really like his work, and I really like the position that he has in the community. 44 bikes. Kris Henry is in Lyndeborough, I don't remember, something in New Hampshire, middle of nowhere, boonies, New Hampshire, and he's got this cute house and this cute little horse barn that he turned into a shop in his backyard. Kris makes beautiful, straightforward mountain bikes and cross bikes and road bikes. I think he says on his website something about how he specializes in bikes that touch dirt, you know, that have knobby tires and cruise over the dirt. And I really like his design sensibility. Stuff is straightforward and simple. It's just a really clean aesthetic. Kris has this background as an industrial designer, and he did a lot of, I think, kind of impressive campaigns and stuff working for, I don't know if campaigns is the right word, but he worked for like Nike and some other companies designing some cool stuff. And Kris designs all his own logos and his website. He's designed some really cool posters and stuff. And then I think the Boston Bike Builders Ball, he designed a logo for that, and some other shows and stuff. And he's just really talented designer, and again, he's got a good sense of like aesthetics and logos, and the bikes are clean and simple. His TIG welds are really beautiful. One of the things I really love about Kris's work is that he machines a lot of his own tools. He machines some of the bike frame parts that you wouldn't need to make yourself. I want to say I think he makes the collar at the top of the seat post on his mountain bikes a lot of times. I'm not sure about that, but anyway, he just makes a lot of the stuff himself, and he documents the process in a way that just makes you like want to get out in the shop and machine stuff. It's just, and like you can tell that for Kris, things have been in the works for ages. That, you know, he didn't just jump into anything. He didn't just, you know, put the shingle out and start selling stuff. He's been like developing and testing, building tools and refining processes for ages, and it shows because he's really good at the stuff that he does. His bikes are just so clean and simple, and I think that's a trick, right? Like if you're in the bike frame building world and you're trying to stand out, but the bikes you're making are just like straightforward, and if you can stand out in spite of how how purpose-driven and straightforward your bikes are. You can still stand out, and you'd almost take the logos off of one of Kris's bikes and still tell that it was his. In fact, in spite of everything being so straightforward, it's really beautiful, and that he's sharing all this information. I think Kris has been really helpful to me over the years. I've had a lot of questions that I've emailed him and talked to him on the phone, and he's taken a lot of time to respond to questions of mine, and it's just really helpful. One time he mailed me this phone, a telephone that he found, this old 70s looking phone that says Cobra on it, and I have it on the wall in my shop. It's so cool. Hi, Kris. Steve Potts. Steve Potts has been building bikes since forever, and his bikes are so clean and so refined, and well, there's a theme here, isn't there? I think all the builders that I really like are building pretty straightforward, pretty clean, and pretty refined bicycles. I think there's a place for really whimsical and out there designs, and I think some people really love that, getting something that you cannot buy in a bike store, something that's like totally out there with, a weird wheel size or some crazy tube bending or something. But my favorite stuff is the frames and the bicycles where, like, form follows function. Everything is pretty straightforward. The tubes are bent for function and aesthetic. Everything is just kind of where it needs to be. And Steve Potts' work is no different. It's just like, when I look at the stuff that he's making and the chainstays, he has this tool that he made to form the chainstays. Titanium building tends to be that you start with round straight gauge tubes, and if you want them to be smushed and bent, you need to create all sorts of your own forming tools and processes, and the tools that he's made to shape and form the chainstays alone on his bikes it's just impressive to me, like the refinement in there. And then he's kind of sharing that too. And so if you follow his Facebook page or his Instagram, you'll see some of the tools that he's made, and he's made a lot of really cool tools. And his shop is just laid out with all these beautiful, old milling machines and lathes. And his welding is impeccable, really, really solid welding on his bikes, just gorgeous stuff. And I've met Steve a couple times, and he's just such a sweet guy, and he's always quick to say, hey, if you have any questions or anything, don't be a stranger, get in touch, let's chat about stuff. When I went to the Philly Bike Expo this year, I was telling him how I had designed this tube bender, right? Which you would have seen if you looked over my channel and checked out some of the videos about this. And he's built tube benders similar for his own needs, and so he was pretty interested when he heard that I had made a tube bender, and he wanted to see it. And I brought a couple tubes to do demonstrations of tube bends, and I had to spend one of those tubes to show Steve the bender, and I was just so tickled to have the opportunity to share that with him, because he's been making custom tools for bike frame building for his own needs since way before I was born. He was telling me how he had made a seat tube bender in his shop for his own needs, and in order to get the necessary leverage to drive the seat tube bend, he needed a long lever, and it kind of got out of control on him, and there was a little bit of a personal injury story, and I don't remember the details exactly, and it's not my story to tell, but I just really appreciated that, hearing his feedback. He mostly had really positive stuff to say about it, which made me feel really special. And then here's this a peer of mine in the business who's been at it way longer than me, who I respect, and I think his work is so much better than mine in the frame building category, but he treats me more like a peer, and I see that we have things in common in our interests and the way that we like to build bikes and the way we like to solve problems with our tools. I really relate to the kinds of bikes that he builds. I'm a huge fan of the Type 2 Unicrown fork that he makes, where he gets a really tight radius bent on some tubing in bulk, and then he'll assemble the forks with a sleeve fit, and oh man, it's just so beautiful and clean and refined. Everything that he does is just, it's got that look of like, I've done this so many times and I've been thinking about it every time I did it, and every time I did it, it gets a little bit closer to being refined just right. And that's like my favorite stuff in the frame building world. These 5 are just the tip of the iceberg. I just wanted to talk about some of my favorites, but I'm working on a podcast. I've recorded one good episode. I lost the audio, but it's coming. It's called the Shut Up and Build Bikes podcast. The idea is I talk on the phone with a frame builder who's been around for a while, for like half hour, 60 minutes, and we just discuss what it was like getting started when they were getting started, the challenges they faced, about their specific niche and what it's like to serve that niche, you know, their favorite things, their frustrations, how they feel about, you know, working with painters, all that stuff. And I want to bring that out and make that, produce that show. I think that's going to be really fun for me to do and hopefully really valuable to everyone else. If you have a favorite frame builder or favorite frame building resource in these sorts of ways we've been talking about, drop it in the comments below. I'd love to chat about that. And if you hit that subscribe button, we're all going to win today. So just join Team Cobra, subscribe, and thank you.